It's my first time wearing pink, or as my pastor growing up would call it, a manly shade of rose. I don't know why he thought that rose was more manly than pink, but I'm okay with pink. My best friend just had his first son. Little Tobias is 3 months old and is just the perfect little bundle of joy, at least for me, because I get to hand him back whenever he's hungry or needs his diaper changed. But I really love him. I love being his, calling me his dunkle, his deacon uncle. But every once in a while, my friend will drop him off at his parents' house, so Toby's grandparents, so they can watch him if he needs to go do something or if he and his wife want to go on a date. There's a little bit of a problem because they have a dog at the house, little Luna, and my friend's sister is very protective of this dog. And so this dog, whenever the baby comes into the house, starts freaking out and gets really, really excited. And dogs don't really know what to do with babies. They think they're just little people, and you can just play with them. But that's not really the case. Dogs and babies don't mix as well as dogs think they should. And so his sister is really afraid of some sort of like punishment or discipline being done to this dog. And so she takes the dog and locks him in her room so that she figures the dog isn't bothering the kid, and then no one is like getting mad at the dog or like punishing him or anything. So everything's fine. The problem is it just kind of like kicks the can down the road. And so the dog isn't used to the kid isn't used to the dog, and so it just isn't working out. So this past week, my friend was going out on a date with his wife, and they drop Tobias off, and his sister is out of the house. And so Toby's grandparents say, great, this is our opportunity. So they take the dog out, and it doesn't go perfectly, but it goes well. So now the dog knows what it's supposed to do around kids. It's supposed to be calmer. It's supposed to be more relaxed. It's not supposed to jump on the kid. And now Toby is more used to, what do I do when there's this big furry thing in the room? And so the avoidance of that discipline, of that training, was actually kind of damaging that whole relationship and the whole family. Any one of us, if we saw a kid reaching his hand towards a stove, would grab him and pull him away. And it might scare the kid, it might even hurt the kid, but we know that the damage would be worse if they touched that hot stove. Has anyone here been trained to do CPR? All right, quite a few actually. So you probably know, you probably heard while you're doing a training, so you get over the person and you put your hands on their chest and you start singing Staying Alive. And one of the things that they tell you in this training is, don't be afraid to break a few ribs. Because that happens quite a bit. You know, you're applying all this pressure over and over, and like there's adrenaline going, and you can't hold back, right? Because just kind of lightly pushing isn't gonna do anything. You have to like really put yourself into it, and ribs will break during this process. But a broken rib is far better than a stopped heart. The gospel today mentions a story about Moses lifting the serpent up in the desert. And usually when the gospel mentions something happening in the Old Testament with Moses or Abraham or Isaac or whoever, usually if it mentions that, then that'll be the first reading. But our first reading mentioned nothing about Moses or serpents. But there was a common theme between them. The story of Moses lifting up the serpent. The people of Israel, after the Exodus, they were wandering through the desert, and you probably remember that the people of Israel in the desert were not very cooperative with God. They caused him a lot of issues. And so they were grumbling, they were complaining, they were kind of planting seeds of rebellion in their hearts. And so God sent poisonous serpents among them. And these serpents bit the people, and they started dying. The people went to Moses and they said, what are we supposed to do? And so they made a serpent out of bronze, and they put it up on a pole and put it in the middle of the camp, high up, so that people could look at it, and whoever looked at it, the poison would leave them and they'd be healed. God sent these poisonous serpents among his people, and in our first reading, he actually allows the promised land to be conquered. He allows his people to be taken into exile, into slavery. Why? Because any one of us seeing our children reach their hand towards a hot stove would pull them away no matter what fear or pain it caused them. How much more so then would God, seeing us reach our hands not towards the hot fire of a stove, but the eternal fires of hell, how far would he go to pull us away? Even if it caused fear, distress, pain. And then, once we're safe, once we're away from the immediate danger, he can hold us, he can comfort us, and then he can tell us what we were doing wrong, how to fix it. He can raise up the Persian king in order to bring his people back into the land so they can serve him once again. He can have a bronze serpent made and lift it up. And in fact, the amazing thing about this is the serpent was the instrument of destruction, but now it is the instrument of salvation, of healing. Just as the serpent was lifted up, Jesus says, the Son of Man must be lifted up. It was through man that sin entered the world, our disobedience to God in the Garden of Eden. We are the instrument of our own destruction. Death is the instrument of our destruction. And so God takes on human nature. He takes on even death. And he lifts it up on a pole, raises it up, so that whoever looks not at a bronze serpent, but at the Son of Man, the Son of God, whoever looks at him and believes in him may be saved. God is willing not only to allow us to be afraid, to suffer in order to save us. He is actually willing to take on that suffering himself. Because God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. His Son came into the world not to condemn the world, not to allow us to touch that hot stove, not to look at our body on the ground, dead from our own sin, and to say, you deserved it, but to get down on his knees, to not be afraid to break a few ribs, and to save us. He came into the world not to condemn the world, but so that whoever believes in him might be saved. even through suffering and fear and pain, we might be saved. That once we are away from that eternal fire, he can show us his love. He can show us his plan for us. Not for pain, but for safety, for life. And beyond that, even for glory.